Hi everyone, and welcome to the April Comfort Book Club discussion of Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. As always for the Comfort Book Club, I'm joined by my mum Donna.
Hello everyone.
We've been really looking forward to chatting about this.
Definitely, yes.
One of our very favourite books.
Yes.
We are having a bit of a different format this time. We're trying something new where for the first section, Mum and I are going to have a general chat about the book, exploring some themes of interest that we noticed. And then after that, we're going to listen to the voice messages that some of the Comfort Book Club readers have sent in advance. And we'll listen through those all together and respond to each one of them as we listen. So a little bit of a different format that we're trying today. But this is such a wonderful book, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, I read it probably under the age of 10 and again as a teenager, then again in my 20s and again in my 30s. I've read it so many times. I love this book.
Yes.
Huge fan.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those books that really made me who I am. It was very influential as a child reading it, and it's one that I've read many times in my adulthood as well. And I so enjoyed returning to it this spring. And it really is a book that I often think about in the springtime. Somehow I always want to pick it up in the spring. Obviously it goes through many years and seasons, but it starts in the spring, which is a bit later in Canada, so it's June that the book starts, and that's really like our sort of April time with the blossom out and lots of spring flowers.
And it's so beautifully described. I mean, she had a magic touch, didn't she?
She really did. Ellen Montgomery was the most amazing nature writer in a way, and of course made everyone want to visit Prince Edward Island. I still have never been, and one year I would love to go. Obviously it's a long way for us. But yes, hopefully one day. And that is part of the magic of the book, her descriptions of Prince Edward Island, her appreciation of the landscape and of the seasons. You know, she gives all that to Anne, a really sensitive, responsive nature to the beauty of the natural world.
I think so. And I really think for me too, what I felt was this is a real place. You can go visit PEI. You know, it's not like Narnia or, you know, Tolkien's worlds. It really is real. And I think that's a very special thing about these books.
That's so true. I think, I mean, we haven't been able to visit PEI ourselves, but I know so many Anne fans have kind of made that pilgrimage to see Green Gables, to see all of the sites. Yes, we live in hope. But I think you're right that's part of what's special about the books is you feel you can go and share a little bit of what Anne would have seen.
And, you know, having a Canadian father and Canadian citizenship myself, it made such a special thing to connect with Canada through this wonderful book that I loved, you know, I absolutely loved.
And same for me, really, also having a Canadian father and passport. That also is a lovely touch for me too. And I was really interested in learning a bit more about how Ellen Montgomery came to write Anne of Green Gables. She wrote it very early on in her writing career, and it really launched her whole writing career. She got lucky very quickly with this novel, although at first it was rejected actually quite a few times. But once it was accepted, it just kind of exploded in popularity. People loved it. But
gives all writers hope. I think she had to put it away 6 times or something, and then
I think she put it away for a few years, just having given up after countless rejections or several rejections anyway, and then finally she brought it out again, thought this isn't actually bad, and sent it off, and fortunately the rest is history. But I came across this description that Ellen Montgomery wrote about the day that she started Anne of Green Gables, and it was on a June day, and of course the novel begins on a day in June, and I thought it was just a really special touch to make that connection with the genesis of the book to the genesis of the story. So I wanted to read this little paragraph that Ellen Montgomery wrote. I remember well the very evening I wrote the opening paragraph of Green Gables. It was a moist, showery, sweet-scented evening in June 10 years ago. I was sitting on the end of the table in the old kitchen, my feet on the sofa, beside the west window, because I wanted to get the last gleams of daylight on my portfolio. I did not for a moment dream that the book I had just begun was to bring me the fame and success I had long dreamed of. So I wrote the opening paragraphs quite easily, not feeling obliged to write up to any particular reputation or style. Just as I had finished my description of Mrs. Lynde and her home, Ewan walked in. He stayed and chatted most of the evening. Ewan was to become her husband, and no more of Green Gables was written that evening. But I just loved that idea.
Absolutely. I loved it too. And I think the association with it being started at the same time as she met the man she was to marry has a very special significance.
Yes,
you know, I think that's
true.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was really fascinated too to read how much of her own life Ellen Montgomery wrote into Anne of Green Gables. And it made me look again, well, with new eyes, I should say, at the dedication. I actually had to get a different edition because the dedication weirdly isn't in this one.
Yeah, we've been reading as many different editions as we've got, which is a lot.
Yes.
As you might guess.
The dedication is in this one, and it's to the memory of my father and mother. So at the time of writing Anne of Green Gables, Ellen Montgomery was an orphan herself, and she's signalling to the reader at the start of the book with the dedication that she is writing this story about an orphan as an orphan. And I find that really interesting. But her mother died when she was very young, wasn't she?
Yes, I think even before she was 2.
Yes, so very, very young.
Yeah.
And her father went away for quite a few years, married again. Maud was sent to live with her grandparents, who were very sort of strict elderly people.
Yes.
And but then later her father died as well, leaving her an orphan. And it's interesting because there have been comparisons made between Anne of Green Gables and books like Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm, by Kate Douglas Wiggins.
Yeah.
And people have said, oh, was there some plagiarism? Because there are strong similarities between the books with the theme of an orphan arriving in a new place and living with a sort of elderly, more difficult woman.
Yes.
But I found it so interesting to learn that actually Ellen Montgomery based a lot of her own life.
Based a lot of her, experiences.
Yes.
On what really she gave to Anne as experiences.
Exactly.
At different times maybe than she went through them.
Yes.
But the same feeling was there.
Yes.
And I hadn't realised how close it was to her own life at all. In fact, I hadn't really thought about, to be absolutely honest, the similarity with like Kate Douglas Wiggins, Heidi, these other books that really feature orphans. Even our last comfort book read, The Secret Garden, there's a real connection. Obviously that's a bit later, but the same. And you realise actually, so sadly in those days, being a child that's left bereft of parents, being sent to live with elderly grandparents or with other family members was not uncommon. No. And, you know, it isn't surprising. There was a lot of orphan literature.
Yes, so what, Jane Eyre, another
Absolutely.
one. You know, so it was quite a common theme at that time in literature. And I wanted to read another extract that Ellen Montgomery wrote about her childhood. And I think you'll see from this description how much Anne of Green Gables was partly based on her own experiences as a child. So Ellen Montgomery wrote what I'm about to read to you probably at about the time that she started writing Anne of Green Gables. So you could see her own experiences as a child were very much in her mind. And I think she was looking back over some of her childhood journals and diaries, for instance, perhaps to help her write Anne of Green Gables. But her own childhood was at the forefront of her mind. And she says, "The older I grow, the more I realize what a starved childhood mine was emotionally. I was brought up by two old people, her grandparents, neither of whom at their best were ever very sympathetic, and who had already grown into set, intolerant ways. They seemed to cherish and act upon the contradictory opinions that a child of 10 or a girl of 15 was as old as themselves and as young as a baby. That is, she should have no wish or taste that they did not have, and yet she should have no more right to an independent existence than an infant. Grandfather McNeil, in all the years I knew him, was a stern, domineering, irritable man. I was always afraid of him. As for grandmother, she was very kind to me in a material way. I was well cared for, well fed, and well dressed, and I may also add that these benefits were unfailingly cast up to me whenever I showed any rebellion. But nature never made two people more dissimilar in every respect essential to mutual comfort. I was impulsive, warm-hearted, emotional. Grandmother was cold and reserved, narrow in her affections and sensibilities."
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
I mean, how much of some kind of wish fulfillment was maybe going on in writing Anne of Green Gables too? I mean, Marilla is such an interesting character in the book.
This time, I found her the most fascinating. Of course, when you're very young and you read it the first time, you can't help, but Anne is everything. But it was so interesting to me this time. Rachel Lynn and Marilla just shone through.
Yeah, well, female relationships, friendships are so important in Anne of Green Gables and in the series as a whole. I've been rereading my way through all of the books. I've got to Anne of Ingleside at the moment. It's so interesting how important female relationships are, and they're often very supportive relationships. But I think you're right. I think as an adult reader, when you read Anne of Green Gables, you see it as much as a story about Marilla's growth and development as it is about Anne's in many ways. Marilla, just like Anne, also actually blossoms through the novel, and she's transformed by love, by loving someone. Love comes in and really transforms her life.
Yes, it does.
Which is, I think, one of the most sort of poignant elements of the story.
It is.
For me. And you get quite a lot of Marilla's perspective in Anne of Green Gables, which I find so interesting.
It is, because it's not a first-person story at all.
No.
And so you do get these different perspectives and little hints from, the author themselves in their narrative voice or whatever you want to call it. And I love that. I love that about it. We learn a little bit of what's going on in Marilla's, her reservations, but also a sense of fairness, but how she blossoms through this love that finds its way into her heart.
And she's able to recognize her own limitations and the fact that she had maybe quite an emotionally starved life herself in many ways, but she's able to recognize that has perhaps limited her and limited her life in some ways, and she becomes so grateful for the presence of Anne, and that Anne has been brought into her life and it does transform it. And some of this transformation is reflected with Anne's bedroom. At the beginning of the book, it's described as really quite like a sterile, almost hostile.
Clean. Yes,
really bare, really clean, but no kind of warmth or beauty to it. Very much like Marilla's personality initially. And then I love by the end of the book, her bedroom is completely transformed. I mean, it's a young woman's bedroom now, so it also reflects Anne's growth and maturity, but it's like love has come into this room, just like how it's come into Marilla's life. There's flowers, there's like dainty ornaments, there's like a lovely dressing table, which has like little cupids around the mirror, which of course points to Anne's forthcoming romance as well, now that she's sort of a woman. But it's become this beautiful kind of heartwarming bedroom. Yeah. And I love how the room reflects Marilla's
absolutely, and of course Matthew's transformation, in that he's allowed to blossom, to show the side of himself that he'd really bottled up. One feels he's not obviously a speaker, not a talkative man, but you know, he and Marilla, you felt lived almost very compatibly, but very separate lives within. I mean, there's love between them as brother and sister, but it isn't the love that blossoms, that makes a change in Marilla's world so completely.
I think that's very true. And I think Matthew is the grandfather figure, father figure that maybe Ellen Montgomery wished that she had had. He's such an important presence in Anne's life, and he's the first person to give her that love and acceptance that she really craves.
Yes, absolutely.
But coming back to female relationships, I think this is so important in the book. I think the real central relationship out of all of them is the one between Anne and Marilla.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's how it's a difficult relationship.
It
especially to begin with, but it's how they come to grow together and to love each other. And that really is a key one in the book. Of course, you've got Anne's friendship with Diana as well, such a wonderful and famous literary friendship. And I love that. I love how they're such good friends, even though Diana is not as imaginative or perhaps as intelligent as Anne.
No, but it's still a very rewarding friendship for both of them.
Yes, it is.
You know, I think that's something that you understand.
Yes, it's like Marilla and Rachel Lynde as
is.
well.
Their
friendship becomes so important, especially in the later books. And Rachel becomes really almost like a second mother to Anne. Down the line as well. She actually becomes a very important figure within Anne's life as well. And there's a lot of tolerance between people. I think they accept that not everyone's perfect.
No, far from it sometimes. And the way they know each other, because it's such a small village, and so they all know that Rachel will be peering out the window when she sees Matthew go by on a day that he shouldn't normally be going anywhere.
Yes, exactly. But in the end, the women really do support each other a lot, and I think that's really wonderful to see in the book. Another really important theme that runs through Anne of Green Gables is that of education, and female education in particular. And again, this is where Ellen Montgomery wrote some of her own experiences into the novel. Her own sort of education pattern is really almost the same that Anne takes. She has Anne perform a bit better, I think, than she herself did, or she did very well. And but she also trained to become a teacher. And I think what was unusual at that time was her grandmother really helped support her with her education and believed it was important that Ellen Montgomery had an education.
As she said, she supported her materially because she gave quite a chunk of money so that she could go away eventually and do a year of college.
Yes, she did go to university, I think, only for a year. She could only afford the year. For Anne, again, it's actually a female person who is able to give Anne her £1,000.
Yes.
Later, I think it's in Anne of Avonlea that this happens, so that Anne can actually go to university in the future too. And again, I think that's interesting. It's women helping women, both financially and emotionally in these books. And I think that's really significant.
It is. And I mean, some of the experiences Anne had before she gets to Green Gables, where she was really not talking about able to go to school or anything. She was so busy looking after all these twins that, you know, she was forced to look after by being essentially a child that was being fostered.
Yes. And just a kind of general help, mother's help. And in some ways, again, Ellen Montgomery was drawing on her own life a little bit. At one point, when her father was still alive and he had remarried, he sent for his daughter to come out and join them.
Teenage years at
I think
point.
so. But she was expected to help her new mother, his new wife, to care for the babies and the children. She was pulled from school at that time to be kept at home to help, and I think she really hated it.
Yes, she did. She didn't stay. She went
went back to Prince Edward Island, to her grandparents, and they were supportive of her education, and she was able to go back into school.
And we really see in Anne of Green Gables that it's so important.
Yes, Miss Stacey's such a lovely character.
Absolutely.
Too.
Again, based on
teacher.
a teacher in her own life, but actually one who wasn't as good. Obviously, Miss Stacey's the perfect teacher, but that, you know, but the elements were all there in Lucy and Maud Montgomery's
and again, it's a
life.
female teacher. Those female relationships. In fact, and bondings.
The bad male teacher was, in fact, who he flirted with in real life was Lucy herself. Yes, you know, she had that experience.
Yes, she did. Yes, it was so fascinating to realise how much of her own life she did write into the novel. But I wanted to talk about another really important theme in the book too, which is that of imagination. I mean, Anne has this incredible imagination,
she does.
Obviously shared by Lucy Maud Montgomery. And it's interesting though, because the novel is quite concerned with when too much imagination can tip over into being a negative. Anne's imagination gets her into trouble sometimes. Like imagining that she's a beauty with raven black hair. That becomes one of the funniest episodes in the book, when she accidentally dyes her hair green and gets her comeuppance in that way. But also when she and Diana talk themselves into a terrible fit of fear over inventing ghost stories.
Yes, absolutely. I love that.
Yeah.
And also that what Anne can do is she can make her imagination into, she names things. She makes it, she actually gives it words. She's able to tell stories with her imagination. And I mean, for Marilla, at first, it's like, oh, that girl, you know, she could talk a hind leg off a donkey sort of thing. But of course, it's her magic too, that she has this glowing ability.
Oh, it is. And that it touches everyone around her as well. And you feel like Anne is a character who had a starved emotional life as a young child, just as Ellen Montgomery felt she had. And you feel she compensates for that lack of love in her early childhood by developing this incredible imagination and this world for herself. And it is a remarkable gift to be able to lead this rich inner life when you have so little example of that.
That's what you feel too. I mean, the way she creates her imaginary friend, for instance, in the glass, you know, and it really touches you, doesn't it? You know, I think the strength of the writing is so real. You know, she does it so well.
I completely agree. And I think what's so important, what's such a magic key component of Anne of Green Gables is Anne herself. She's just such a lovable heroine.
She speaks to so many hearts. I think mine for sure, yours for sure. But, you know, absolutely. And don't you think it's interesting that there's a lot of literary allusions in the book, but I found it fascinating to think that these allusions would have been very familiar because they're actually taken from the readers that every child would get at school and the sort of poetry and prose that they would have been exposed to. We see a lot of that, in fact, in the Anne books.
Yes.
How, and I feel that also makes a connection. It would have, especially, of course, to contemporary readers, but
of that time.
Yes, of course. Yeah. But for us too, we can recognize, these glowing allusions that actually add depth as well.
Yes,
to
I think that's
story.
That's so true, and sometimes provide rather comic incidents, like the whole Lady of Shalott.
Yes.
Could have ended badly, but fortunately Gilbert was on hand. But yes, I love the fact that Anne loves literature. She loves stories and storytelling as well, and I think that's something that really connects you to her.
Yeah, absolutely.
And she isn't a perfect heroine by far either. No. I mean, she also has her faults.
Right temper.
Well, yes, the famous temper. That with her red hair, that was such a cliche.
Yes.
But one that certainly is present in this book.
Yes.
But also, I find one of her more interesting faults is that she really cares what other people think of her. She wants to be liked so much by other people.
Yeah.
And sometimes that leads her astray. But it's such a human fault.
It is.
And quality. And it's a bit unusual. You think of Jo March, for instance, very imaginative as well, wanting to be a writer, but she's much more of the, doesn't give a fig for anyone's opinions type.
Yes,
Anne isn't
definitely.
like that. She cares a bit too much.
Exactly.
What other people think of her.
In fact, and when you think back to The Secret Garden, she also did not care what anybody thought. Mary was not someone who was that sensitive to others' opinions.
Exactly. Whereas Anne is very sensitive. But that's, a very common failing. So I think it's one that many people can empathise with. And yes, she just is such a magic ingredient.
And she goes on, of course, in the other books. You're reading them again.
Yes.
And you found this very interesting. In fact, she's less apparent as the books go along.
She is. And one thing I found out actually is I've been reading my way through the series. I'm just on Anne of Ingleside now. And what I discovered was that two of the books, Anne of Windy Willows or Windy Poplars as it was published in the States, although Ellen Montgomery apparently preferred the title Anne of Windy Willows.
Yes.
But Anne of Windy Willows and Anne of Ingleside were written retrospectively. They were actually both written a lot later than all of the other Anne books. And I found that really interesting because certainly on my reread of Anne of Windy Willows, I noticed how little in a way of Anne's story was kind of developed in that book, and it was more episodic than the others, bringing in lots of different characters and sort of long monologues in a way of storytelling. I still really enjoyed it, but I did notice a difference, and I thought that was so interesting that they were written much later and slotted in retrospectively.
Presumably her publisher encouraged her to do that.
I'm sure. But I was very interested to learn that. But I also encourage everyone to read the rest of the series.
Are you going to keep going?
I am, yes. Good. I'm going to keep going because it gives you an interesting perspective on her character, the character of Anne as a whole, and on the books as a whole too. So.
I want to definitely reread Willa of Ingleside and
those I think are your favourites.
They're my favourites. After the Anne early ones for sure. Mm-hmm. I love those too. Yes. And in fact, I know I'm going to have a big box of tissues.
Yes, warning there.
So
yes, but they are very good.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's our perspective on the book. Now we'll shift to hearing from some of the Comfort Book Club readers. Thank you so much to everyone who sent in a voice message. It was really lovely to hear from you. So let's see who we have. So I'm going to start with Myriam. Play Myriam's message.
Hi, Miranda, Donna, and the Comfort Book Club family. I'm Myriam from California. I'm really enjoying reading all these great classic books that you've been recommending to us that most people have probably already read in their youth, whereas they're all new to me. Anyway, the beginning of Anne of Green Gables was so sad. These poor orphans being adopted out to families for free labor. And I felt so bad for poor Anne, where just because she's a girl, she was either going to be sent back to the orphanage or to that awful woman, Mrs. Blewett. But I'm glad she got to stay with Marilla and Matthew anyway. Throughout the book, you're really rooting for Anne, even when she makes mistakes. And I love how she came up with all these names for areas in her neighborhood, like the Lake of Shining Waters, for example. And I loved reading how she found so much beauty all around her, even just looking out her window. One of my favorite quotes from her was, "My life is a perfect graveyard of buried hopes." I just love that. Anyway, thank you for this great recommendation. Bye.
Oh, thank you, Myriam.
Yes, thank you, Myriam. That made me laugh.
Yes,
because that quote.
Yes,
just,
I know. I love that saying of Anne's. She's got so many quirky little phrases. Yes, are so funny.
Make
but
you laugh.
Yes, I love the way that she also names places, gives them such imaginative, beautiful names.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, I think that's really special.
You did that as a child yourself after reading the book.
Oh, I can imagine I was inspired by her.
You were. Yes. I forget what you called some things that in our neighbourhood, but I do remember that very clearly. And I had a little secret smile and said, "That's a lovely name."
I'm sure a lot of children have been inspired
probably
by Anne in that way. But yes, thank you so much for your message, Myriam. Let's hear from the next reader. This is Silje from Norway, so let's listen to her message.
Hello, Miranda. Hello, Donna. I am Silje from Norway, and this is my third time reading Anne of Green Gables. I read it first in Norwegian about 7 years ago, and the other 2 times in English. I just love how Anne sees the best in everyone, and always tries to focus on the pretty things in the world, even when things are tough. Through the eyes of Anne, we can all see the beauty of every season, even October, which can be cold and grey. And Montgomery describes PEI in a way that brings me right back to the gorgeous island. I really enjoyed reading this again. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much. I agree. I think it's wonderful how Anne appreciates the beauties of every season.
Absolutely, that's an inspiration. Thank you, Silje, for those contributions, because I really agree too that she just has always this optimistic outlook. She can be sometimes overly dramatic and sometimes, quite negative in that way. But generally, her whole attitude is to be optimistic.
Yes, she is. She really is a very optimistic person, which I love as well. So let's hear from the next contributor, Laura. Let's hear Laura's message.
Hello, Miranda. Hello, Donna. This is Laura from Italy. Anne of Green Gables has a special place in my library. I didn't read it as a child. When I was a child, many, many years ago, it wasn't very popular in Italy. I read it for the first time 10 years ago, and while at first I felt I had missed a great opportunity in my childhood, I now realize that reading it as an adult had a much greater impact on me. Anne's imaginative, joyful vision of the world has really helped me to consider things from a different point of view. One of my favorite quotes is in chapter 5. It's been my experience that you can nearly always enjoy things if you make up your mind firmly that you will. Anne's determination to savor life and beauty is such a precious lesson.
Oh, thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Laura. That quote is in my Commonplace book because I love that too. I think it's a very special outlook. And yes, I think you're right. Any adult who comes to this for the first time, hopefully, would find a lot there to enjoy, even if you missed it as a child.
Yes, I completely agree as well. Thank you, Laura. So let's hear from the next contributor, Marie. Let me just play Marie's message.
Hello, Miranda, Donna, and fellow kindred spirits. This is Marie. What I love about this book is the author's descriptions. She describes how Anne gets her first glimpse of a canopy of snowy, fragrant bloom on the trees, and a purple twilight with glimpses of a painted sunset sky shining like a great rose window of a cathedral. Having lived in PEI, I've been fortunate to visit Green Gables in spring when all the frothy blossom was on the trees, as well as in winter when I was the only person there, and I wandered through deep snow across the bridge and to the edge of the wood. There is a real sense of place and lots of room for imagination. Thank you for choosing Anne of Green Gables.
Oh, thank you, Marie.
Thank you, Marie. How
wonderful.
special. Yes,
to have visited Green Gables itself.
And in different seasons too. I think
exactly.
That's lovely.
Yeah, and you've been there by yourself. So that must have been very special. Thank you for sharing that. Let's hear from the next contributor, Sherri.
Hi, Miranda and Donna and everyone. I love this book. I have never read it before. I am really just bowled over by how wonderful it is. I fell in love with the book as soon as Anne was introduced, as soon as Matthew picked her up at the train station, because when I was her age, I was just like her. I was a chatterbox. I had a wild imagination. I'd get in trouble because of my imagination. I was so related to her. I loved it. Thank you for recommending it.
Oh, thank you, Sherri.
Thank you, Sherri. How lovely that someone really understood Anne because she herself was like that too.
Yeah.
I wasn't that imaginative. I wasn't. You know, I loved the book, but I think I loved it just for the whole storytelling aspect of it, you know?
I always loved Anne, but I was never such a talker.
No, true. Hard to believe now, of course.
But thank you for sharing that, Sherri, and I'm so glad you read it for the first time.
That's lovely
with the Comfort Book Club. Eriko also sent in a message, so let's hear Eriko's message.
Hello, Comfort Book Club readers. I'm Eriko from England. It was such a joy to be returning to the world of Anne once again. Growing up, I adored all of Anne books. As an adult, reading it again made me feel somewhat reflective on my own childhood, and also the fact that how quickly we all have to grow up and leave our innocence behind. Anne herself sums it up perfectly for me. She says, "It's fun to be almost grown up, but it's not the kind of fun I expected." Life is never a straight path, just as Anne finds out in the last chapter, The Bend in the Road. So perhaps there is a message for all of us, not to forget our childlike imagination and curiosity, and always to remember to dream once in a while. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Eriko.
Thank you so much, Eriko. That was lovely. What a lovely perspective to give us on that.
Yes, definitely. And yes, a lovely reminder to retain a bit of that childlike curiosity,
sense of
wonder of the world around us. I think that's a beautiful message to take from the book. So thank you for sharing that with us. And then let's hear from our last Comfort Book Club reader who sent in a message, Dianne.
Hello, Miranda and Donna. This is Dianne from southwestern Ontario, Canada. Thanks for choosing Anne of Green Gables for this month's Comfort Book Club. It has long been one of my favorite books. I read it as a child and now reread the books yearly. I have many of Lucy Maud's books. I collected some and inherited some from my mum. Her writing is so descriptive I can feel myself in her surroundings. I especially like Anne, Marilla, and Mrs. Lynde and the way the characters grow and change as the story progresses. My favorite scene is Anne and Matthew driving to Green Gables and going through the avenue, which Anne renames the White Way of Delight. Such beauty. Goodbye, everyone. Happy reading.
Oh, thank you, Dianne.
Yeah, thank you, Dianne. That's lovely. I think we all really begin to feel her imagination when her joy in entering that avenue of trees and the way it's described. It's wonderful, it's special, isn't
yes, it really is.
Yeah.
But thank you again to everyone who sent in a voice message. It was so lovely to hear your thoughts, and thank you to everyone who read along with us this month. It's been such a lovely reading month. To remind you of next month's Comfort Book Club choice, let me just get it. It is Life in the Garden by Penelope Lively. I'm really looking forward to reading this one together. This is a non-fiction choice. It's a little bit different, but one that I hope we will all enjoy. And also I'll be just changing the discussion dates for the Comfort Book Club soon. This is the last time I'm uploading a video on a Sunday. As I said last week, I'm now going to be moving to uploading on Thursdays because we both need a bit of a weekend back. So I'm going to be moving to Thursday, so I'll be updating some of the dates for May and June Comfort Book Club discussions, but really looking forward to reading that together. Thank you so much for watching this video. Extra big thanks to everyone who pressed the super thanks button on my last video. As always, I really appreciate your support. I hope you enjoyed watching this discussion and really looking forward to the next video. See you on Thursday. Goodbye.
Bye-bye, everyone.